Hello, lovely people, and welcome back to our art journey. Today, we are going to see the second part of the Western Bluebird illustration. Well, as you saw in the first part, I started mixing some watercolor base with colored pencils and watercolor pencils. In this case, the Inktense pencils, which are ink based and from the Wend. And as I said before, this is a brand that I like very much, and also a series that I really find kind of magical because this is a ink based, as I said, and very pigmented. And when it's dry, it doesn't fade very easily, and you cannot change it. It's not like the watercolor pigments that you can go with the water and perhaps do some changes and work on the pigments. Still, the Inktense series won't allow you that, which creates a very strong and bold, colorful work without fading and moving. So here I am using these pencils and showing you how to use them as any other watercolor pencils would work the same way as I said before. So you would just put some water, take the pigments, more or less water in this case, as we are working in this illustration with the pencils and no paints. I am using a not so wet brush, so it is just humid, just to touch the pencils, the tip of the pencils, not to damage the mine. And sometimes when I worked with the pencils directly on the paper, so it allows me to use the pencil, to use the brush, just humid, to work on the existing pigments that I put on the paper. Um, as I said before, one important thing is to pay attention how much water you are using on your pencil, on your brush, and this is going to be very, very little. And if you see that it's too much, just dry it first before going with the brush to the pencil. And when using the brush on the pencil, pay attention that you are just touching only the tip. It is enough for you to take the pigments to work on your paper, especially if you do as I have done before, if you have colored with the watercolor pencils. Well, another very good tip here is when you are using such a very thin brush and almost dry, I would say, as I said before, just a little bit humid. Um, a good tip here is for the details of feathers and downs is to take your pigments and spread with the fingers very, very smoothly the hair of the brush so that you can create traces that are parallel to each other on just one stroke. That helps, and as I said, if it's only humid, you are almost drawing a very, very light detail, very light traces that will help you give a more dynamic way of the feathers. And sometimes on the edge of the bird, you will see that it will look almost, how can I say, translucent, as the light would um, come through those little traces and those little feathers and downs, which looks for me very beautiful. Well, getting such an illustration in a more realistic way requires patience. Yes, because everything in art is, my pupils would understand, and because they heard this so many times before, everything in art has to do with lights and shadows. So, as in nature, where there is light, there will be shadows, and that's where we can find the volume and the depth of everything. So, yes, such an illustration requires patience because these little details, the little shadows that you put on the feathers and in the downs, between and among the downs, this will make the whole difference to your drawing. It will make it look more natural. And that's what we want to achieve here, a more natural illustration. It doesn't have to be, in the sense, hyper-realistic, but we are going into a more realistic way. So all these little traces on the feathers and all the little shadows and lights that we are placing among, as I said, among the feathers and downs, will help you achieve that natural reality that we are aiming here. And now I am starting with the beak, and soon we will start with the eye, which is the most satisfying part, I would say, because this is when we get to see something coming into life. You know, one very important thing to think about is your light. I always say that, and I have to reinforce this this omnipresent question, is where your light comes from and how you will show this light and the highlights. So, as well as in the feathers and downs, as I said before, we have to try to get this reality, or to get this dynamic on the beak and the eyes. Because if we pay attention to nature, what makes a being look alive, this is that glare in the eyes. This is where life lays in every living being, besides, of course, trees and plants that we don't see the eyes directly, but where we see eyes, like birds, like humans, like mammals, and even fish, and plenty of other, we see life in the eyes. And this is what we want to achieve here, to look at this bird and have the impression that it's alive. Well, here comes kind of the tip that I pretty much like to give to people, which is not to start the eye already very strongly. The biggest mistake people will do, or usually do, is using a very hard, dark color, and sometimes even worse, sometimes they go straight with the black. So please do not go with any black right away. Perhaps you can use a little bit of black at any point in time, but let's forget that black exists for a while, or most of times, because we have other colors that we can darken things in a lighter, more natural, more efficient way. So we start with perhaps a light brown. I think I use here first I think I used the dark brown or the chocolate brown, and then I went to the umbre, I believe I have to check this again. I can put this in the list here in the comments, but the most important thing is you can go with a brown, you can go with an indigo blue, you can go with shades of green, depending on how the light is shining on the eyes and the object that you are portraying there. So then you can start darkening it up with these colors. In this case, I used first a light watercolor layer, and then I came with the colored pencil, which is not a watercolor pencil. It is a colored pencil that stays. So it means the shades and the shadows that I have put in there in this eye with that colored pencil, they will stay, and that's exactly what I wanted, because when I go with the other watercolor pencils over it and push and pull my pigments, this layer of the colored pencil won't move. Means that shadow will stay there exactly where I want. Well, a little tip for the highlights, if you are working with a good watercolor pencil, is to use the white and to wetten the tip of the pencil straight away. As you see, I am using the Inktense one, which is very strong and probably won't dilute or fade afterwards. So some little details can be done this way with the white, and also to make the highlights brighter and more shiny, I would say. Well, I hope you enjoy it, and as usual, I ask you to please like, comment, share, subscribe, do all these things that help us keep going doing this, and hope you relax and could learn a little bit. And don't forget to always, always, always stay positive. See you soon. Bye bye.